Hello, this is Brian again. Welcome to part 2 of the I don't know, should I call this the Random Gully by Buckhorn Spring? Or should I just call it Sequoia Grove? But I don't want to give it away Just kind of want to lead up into it. There are several giant sequoias over here. And of course, their close relative, the Incense-Cedar, is growing here too. You can see the trees are very colorful, they're lively, they're lush, they're getting big, they're getting tall, they're growing very rapidly. What does that say? That this microclimate right here is very good for them. Again, we're at about an elevation of 6,550 to 6,600 feet above sea level, and upslope, you're predominantly in your yellow pine forest, which is the Jeffrey, well, for our case, it's the Jeffrey pine. There are occasional ponderosas in the area too. Jeffrey, ponderosa pines, white fir, incense-cedar, and sugar pine here and there. So we're in yellow pine forest. Giant sequoia is very much at home in yellow pine forest. And here it is. Again, stringy bark, and you can see a lot of the lower branches are deciduous. They die off as the tree grows up. I suspect that these trees will get quite large. I don't know if they're going to get up to 250 feet or maybe not even 200 feet. I don't know, because this is a little bit on the drier side of what they would normally be found in. But these trees are already over 100 feet tall, so they're on their way. Especially these guys here, and they're already starting to show their characteristic buttressing on their trunks. As you can see, the trunk kind of flares a little bit towards the bottom. Pretty typical for Sequoia dendron giganteum. And again, the leaves are the needles are kind of spiky, a little spiky. They don't hurt too much in your hand. They might prick you a little bit. But this is where some people get confused. They confuse sequoias and incense-cedars. And I hear that a lot here in Angeles National Forest. Like, I'll watch people's videos or read their blogs, and they're thinking they're looking at giant sequoia trees, where in fact, they're looking at California incense-cedar, Calocedrus decurrens, which is this guy right here. But, so how do you tell the two apart? Well, there are several surefire ways. When it comes to the foliage, California incense-cedar, Calocedrus decurrens, tends to have flatter sprays of foliage, like here. You can see, very flat spray, very typical. Giant sequoias have rounded sprays, more rounded, or more three-dimensional sprays is a better way to put it. Another thing, incense-cedar's leaves are scale-like and pressed up against the twig. Again, go back to that spray of foliage. This little segment right here, this little dead segment, the camera doesn't get a good view of it. This little segment from my thumb to the end of this contains several leaves. It looks like one needle, but they're all pressed against the stem. Giant sequoia, again, not flattened sprays, and their foliage, their leaves stick out. A little bit more needle-like. Okay, so there we go with that. Bark. Bark is another way to tell them apart. From a distance, especially with larger sequoias, they tend to have that reddish-brown color bark just like the incense-cedar. Now I gotta try to find an incense-cedar tree here that has a little more age to it. Alright, well, incense-cedar kind of has that reddish-brownish bark. So does giant sequoia, especially when giant sequoia gets larger. You can see here, these younger trees tend to be a little bit darker. The bark on these sequoias tend to be a little bit darker. but they're spongy. You can actually put your thumbprint into the bark a little bit. Incense-Cedar, you can't. Because when they both get older, their bark becomes very furrowed. Very furrowed. But Incense-Cedar, you can't press your thumb in and have the soft tissue heal. It's hard bark. Very hard bark when the tree matures. Giant Sequoias, a little bit foamier. And of course there comes the size. Incense-Cedar trees are typically a lot smaller than giant Sequoias. Giant Sequoias get humongous, let's put it that way. Alright, so here is a just open cone of Sequoiadendron giganteum. It's a little more shaped, maybe a little bit more shaped like a pine cone, kind of. So these green cones are the ones that are hosting the seeds. And the seeds are kind of flat and ovalish in shape, with the main body in the middle and the wings on the edges. Incense-Cedar, the tip, there's a seed at the tip, and then the wing goes behind it. I'm trying to see if I can find any Incense-Cedar cones. Really not a lot of mature trees over here, so Incense-Cedar cones are a little bit harder, but Incense-Cedar cones are very different. They're kind of, before they open, they're shaped like duckbills. And then after they open, they kind of spread apart, kind of like this. When they're closed, they're kind of shaped like that. And when they open, they're like that, with a bract in the middle and then the scales on the side. I'm trying to see if I can find an Incense-Cedar cone, but I might be unsuccessful. It doesn't seem the Incense-Cedars are producing seeds this year. So that is weird. Usually I see Incense-Cedars producing seeds every year, so I'm kind of a little shocked, to be honest with you. But one thing is, giant Sequoias generally prefer fire or other disturbance to clear the soil and to recycle nutrients and minerals back into it for regeneration. Incense-Cedars, they will often recolonize in the absence of fire. Doesn't mean they won't recolonize after fire, but I noticed that there are places where there hasn't been any fire for a long time, and you got a mixture of mostly white fir and Incense-Cedar. Places like Palomar Mountain State Park in northern San Diego County, there are spots where it's just white fir and Incense-Cedar for your conifers. And it's because of fire suppression. Doesn't allow the Pacific ponderosa pines that are found in lower French Valley to repopulate the rest of the area. Let me just go down this little slope here. But yeah, Incense-Cedars and white firs will take over the forest if fire is being suppressed. So let's see, go to Palomar Mountain in San Diego County, especially the state park area, Dome Valley, Upper Dome Valley, and look around. You'll see areas where it's just almost all Incense-Cedar and white fir. And then you'll see Incense-Cedar seedlings all over the forest floor. It's almost like a lawn of Incense-Cedar seedlings, is probably the best way to put that. But yeah, so giant Sequoias tend to regenerate better with disturbance, especially fire. Doesn't mean that they won't, because if you take the Black Mountain Trail in the San Jacinto Mountains in Riverside County, take the Black Mountain Trail, there's actually a regenerating grove of giant Sequoias. In fact, a couple of the Sequoias I passed here in this little grove right here, a couple of them are pretty small. It looked like they probably were naturally regenerative. So yeah, there you have it. Giant Sequoias. We got some giant Sequoias, and they're planted, scattered throughout the Angeles National Forest. So you'll find them a lot in campgrounds, and then sometimes you'll find them in rogue spots like this. I believe that the Forest Service plants them partially for reforestation purposes. And what I mean by that is they're supposed to be pretty tolerant of the pollution. And you know, we're not that far from the Los Angeles basin. So pollution does bank up against the sides of these mountains. You gotta expect that. And Jeffrey pines, ponderosa pines, and white firs are a little more susceptible. Speaking of which, I want to show you that huge white fir. I've been by this tree a few times. That is the tallest white fir I believe I've ever seen. Except for maybe one along the Burkhart Trail. There's one that's really girthy like this one that might be comparable size. But it's hard to see up to the crown of the tree because it's surrounded by a thick forest. Burkhart Trail is surrounded by very thick forest. There are some big white firs in there too. This is probably the biggest white fir, one of the biggest white firs I've ever seen. And this also includes the Sierra Nevada. I've seen a few bigger ones there. Well, that's Abies concolor variety Lowiana in the Sierras, according to Michael Kaufman. Theirs is variety Lowiana. Ours is Abies concolor variety concolor. Abies concolor variety Lowiana is normally a larger tree anyways. But here's the tree. The trunk is so thick on this tree that the bark goes beyond its normal furrowing and actually starts forming plates. Well, I did a spotlight on trees on white fir. I didn't really talk much about bark furrows and bark plates. Well, I talked about the furrow of the bark, but I didn't really talk about the plates that occasionally can form. You got to get quite large before they start forming these relatively flat plates. But then again, it could be a result of mechanical damage. Actually, this might actually be because of some mechanical damage. You can see, very thick bark. It's a very impressive tree. It's one of the tallest trees here in Angeles National Forest that I've seen. Then again, I haven't been in the Cucamonga Wilderness, which is mostly part of the San Bernardino National Forest. But it's here in San Gabriel. But it is quite an impressive tree. Always enjoyed seeing this. Yeah, here's your typical white fir bark right here, gray and furrowed. But yeah, that might be because some of the bark might have got knocked off. Maybe a car bumped into it or something. But yeah, always loved seeing this tree. And it's right close to the exit. The entrance road to Buckhorn's a little ways up that way, by a half mile or so. I've always been impressed by this white fir. Always. What a beautiful tree. There's some big Jeffrey pines in the background too. But yeah, whoa. There you have it. What a beautiful tree. Probably should have done my spotlight on that, but then the one I saw in the San Bernardinos was impressive too. Gosh. Now that's a beautiful tree right there. And when I get to the Sierras, I'll finally be able to do some spotlights on some Sierra trees. Really, with the coronavirus and everything, I haven't made any plans to go that far, you know, stay places overnight, like in hotels and stuff. I'm a little concerned. I want to wait till it gets a little safer, I think. Traffic. There they are. Those tall, narrow spires. Beautiful giant sequoias. And there's a nice little Jeffrey pine. And beautiful big white alders in there. So I like this area. Go down in there, trees even get larger. With the exception of that narrow white fir. That tree never ceases to amaze me. How beautiful and lush that tree is. And there we are, one last parting shot of the white alders, giant sequoia. And thanks for watching my video clip. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to drop a comment if you have any questions or anything you want to point out. Look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on another one of my adventures.